Welcome to our latest Hippocratic Adventures interview. I am Dr. Shwini Bapat, and today we are so excited to have Dr. Natalie Newman with us. Dr. Natalie Newman is a board-certified emergency medicine physician who has been practicing for over 25 years. She attended medical school at Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland, Ohio on an Army scholarship. She then completed EM residency at North Shore University Hospital in Manhasset, New York. After residency, she entered active duty service with the US Army, and she was deployed to Bosnia-Herzegovina, the former Yugoslavia, where she was chief of the emergency department at Eagle Base in Tuzla, Bosnia. After returning home, she was promoted to major and completed the rest of her Army service at Fort Bragg. She subsequently returned to her home state of California, where she continued her emergency medicine practice as an independent contractor. In April 2022, Dr. Newman relocated to New Zealand, where she currently practices as a rural health medicine specialist. She is also an active writer, and you can find her at the blog Authentic Medicine.
Authentic Medicine.
Authentic Medicine. And we will include the link to that below. All right, Dr. Newman, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. So tell us your story. How did you end up practicing in New Zealand? And you have kind of 25, 27 years to catch us up on.
Right. Well, about 2011 was the first I heard of ER docs going to New Zealand. I was working in a rural area of California. I was working with a colleague who was the assistant chief of our department, and he was leaving, and everybody really liked him. And I said, well, where are you going? He said, I'm going to New Zealand. And I said, for what? He said, to work. And I said, really? He's like, I'm going to do locum tenens for a year. And his wife was a PA there, and they were going and taking their kids, and they were gone for a year. And when they came back, I was like, well, how was it? He said, it was fantastic. As a matter of fact, we came back home to sell our home, and we're moving there permanently. And that was around 2011. And I was like, wow. And that was the first bug in my ear about that. But kind of forgot about it. Then around 2017, I started becoming unhappy with the state of emergency medicine and where it was going. Then there was, I could see that there was becoming a glut because so many ER residencies were being open, which meant compensation was going to drop. There's a lot of dissatisfaction with ER docs being replaced by non-physician practitioners because they were cheaper. And it just kind of was going down a negative pathway. And then, a lot of ER physicians are kind of forced to supervise non-physician practitioners, which when we don't even know who's been trained where or their background. So all of that made me kind of unhappy. I didn't like that, my license I've managed to keep clean all these years, and I wanted to keep it that way. And then I didn't like the corporatization of medicine. Felt like I didn't get to really enjoy medicine and enjoy the treatment of patients. Constant pressure by pencil pushers and clipboard cops. So then I started thinking about working out of the country, and that was around 2017. So the first place I went was the Caribbean. I worked in St. Thomas, and I loved it. The pay was extremely low, but there were other perks, obviously, because it's St. Thomas. And I really loved it. And I just, but at that time, around 2018, 19, more docs were going to New Zealand. It was like a whole influx of them into New Zealand. And I joined this other Facebook group, and they were talking about it, and it just, everybody was so happy and content. And it wasn't about the money. They made money, but they felt that it balanced out because they didn't have to pay for health insurance unless they wanted to. And even when you pay for private, it's pretty cheap for a family. And they had a quality of life. I remember reading one doc who said, I have dinner with my kids, like the simple things. Wow. And it was it moved me because I'm like, we get so used to the way we work in the US that those little meaningful things, you don't realize you're missing them until you have them back. Then I said, I'm just going to start looking. And I looked in a lot of places. I looked in Saipan and Bermuda and Guam and the British Virgin Islands and, a lot of even South Africa. And but Australia just kept pulling me. It was something about when just what the people were saying and the peace of mind they felt, the humane way that they practice. And I just said, you know what, I'm going to apply there. So around 2020, December, or I think it was it the end of 2020? I know I activated my passport. I got that activated. It had been inactive for 10 years. And I
Wow.
reactivated it right before they put a freeze. So I was lucky it got activated. So once it was activated, I applied. And I think that that might have been in, I'm trying to think, March 2020. So it might have been December 2019, I think.
So right before COVID.
Right before. And so that's when I applied to have it reactivated, and I got it back in March.
Wow.
Right when the hard, right? And so I'm applying, and everybody thinks I'm applying because I'm trying to get away from COVID. And I said, listen, I didn't know anything about COVID when I reactivated my, I didn't know. It's just a coincidence. And found out that there were a lot of American and British stocks applying to New Zealand at that time. They had a huge number of applications. I was fortunate to get 2 interviews. I had a great recruiter from a British. I went with a British recruiting company that I found online. Best recruiter I've ever had in my entire life. And she just asked me, what are you looking for? And I told her I'm looking for an ER job where I can do inpatient care and emergency medicine. I had experienced that when I worked in Catalina Island in California. That's the kind of setup they had, but there was no name for it. I was just, it was a bait switch. I was called to come and work in the ER. And when I got there, they said, by the way, you're going to do some inpatient care and you're going to work in the nursing home, right? They wait till you get there on an island and you can't leave. And they'd add another job, right, and pay you the same. And it was lousy pay, but it was the best job I've ever had. And ever since then, I said, I want to find work like that where I can have a mix, because I was getting kind of burnt out. So I told her what I was looking for, and she said, you know what, I think I have a job for you. And she sent me the flyer. And when I saw it, I said, get me that job. That's the job I want. It's clear. It felt right. That vibe you get. I just said, that's where I'm supposed to be. That's where I'm going. And I don't care what happens, I'm coming to New Zealand. It took 2 years because I was a board certified emergency physician going to work on rural health medicine. And we're used to having primary care physicians, who came. They have GPs, or you may know, they have GPs in New Zealand a lot. That's very common. And so it's either GPs, or if you come from the US, your family medicine or internal medicine, and then you do ER. Right. But they had not had anyone who was a board certified ER physician who says, I do ER, but I'm going to do inpatient care. So Medical Council of New Zealand put me through the ringer, and I had to show that because I worked in corrections, and I still do when I'm in the States, 5 years, and I had done a lot of primary care and stuff. And so I had to get letters, like 4 different letters. I had a 2.5-page cover letter making my case about why I would be an asset to the rural area, and they don't need to worry that I'm going to kill anybody. And I just, if I was standing in front of them, I would have convinced them, but I couldn't. So I had to do it in writing. And luckily I'm a writer. So
that worked out well.
I wrote out why they should take a chance on me. And they did. And they finally approved it. And then the rest is history. And I came to the job, and I'm very happy. It's where I belong. It was the right decision.
Wow, that sounds incredible. So it sounds like actually this journey has taken from when you initially heard about an EM doc going to New Zealand. That was about 10 years ago. And so that was kind of when that seed was planted. And over the course of a couple of years, you realize healthcare in the US, the way EM is being practiced, is not quite what you want anymore. And then you actually did a stint in the Caribbean, and that got you excited about, what else could be out there.
We have choices. We have choices, and it's only us setting the boundaries. And I think we have to be able to look beyond that, and that I've always felt that as an ER physician, I could use my skills in other areas. So I worked for Coachella Festival for 3 years. I was a ship physician for 1.5 years. I just felt like there are skills we can use in other areas where I don't have to stay stuck in an emergency department for 25 years. Now, when I got out of residency, the thinking was you go find a group to work with, you stay with them so many years and you retire, you become a partner and you retire. And that was the plan. But what no one explained is that the culture of medicine was going to change and I would be unhappy. And my motto is if you can't change, if the circumstances don't change, then you have to change your circumstances.
Right.
And because I wanted to be happy, I wasn't ready to quit medicine, but I went to corrections because I was sick of ER, the way it was being practiced, and I didn't want to be told what to do anymore. And so I stepped away from it for a while. And I loved correctional medicine, and the company I worked for allowed me to work the way I like to work. And they were happy with me. I was happy with them. So there was no problem, but I missed ER. And I'm not ready to leave it yet, but I didn't want to stay in it 24/7. I liked the mix that I had in Catalina Island. So that's what I set out to find, and I found it. So I had never heard of a rural health medicine specialist. All I did was Google. I simply hit Google and said, rural emergency medicine jobs for physicians. That's all I did. This company popped up called Head Medical. I read, some of their testimonies from other docs, and decided, well, let me, they send people all over the world. Let me check out with them. And I got this wonderful recruiter. And she told me, she said, I've never been with anybody else where it took this long, to come to New Zealand. This is the longest it's ever taken, but she stood by my side and fought with me and had my back. And believe me, when I said, I know where I'm supposed to be. And I don't care what the Medical Council of New Zealand says, I'm coming to New Zealand. I don't care what they say, I'm coming, and she just was my advocate, and she made it happen. And I'm forever grateful to her. We're actually friends now because it's been a 2-year relationship of fighting this battle. And so now I'm settled and everyone's happy and I don't get any problems, but I'm on a, provisional supervision thing, which is typical for New Zealand,
So then going to talking a little bit about the process of obtaining your New Zealand medical license, it sounds like because this position that you were applying for was rural medicine in New Zealand, which is typically, you were saying, staffed by family doctors or general practitioners, or if they're coming from the US, internal medicine or family medicine doctors, it was actually a little unusual for you as an emergency medicine physician. And so it sounds like that's why you had to jump through a couple more hoops than typical.
I'm the first, actually, from what
you're the first. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not many ER docs want to do inpatient care.
Fair enough. Maybe that's why they chose emergency medicine in the first place.
I didn't want to either, but it changed, life changed. So
fantastic. And so can you tell us about, first of all, what rural health medicine in New Zealand looks like? And then tell us about what that supervision process is like.
Well, rural health medicine is literally doing both emergency medicine and inpatient care. I don't do outpatient care. I don't work in a clinic. I work on a ward, a medical ward where I take care of inpatients. And like I told you, at Catalina Island, I fell into it by accident, but I ended up loving it because when you admit a patient and then you follow them on the ward, they remember you because you're the one who admitted them. And there's some continuity there. And when it's a very small place, you do get to know the patients and so on. And I don't know, that was the only job I ever had like that in the US, but it just resonated with me. And I always tried to find that. It was difficult to find because most of the time when you work rural, you are doing ER only. And so, but that's how, I found it. But anyway, what was your point that you wanted? Oh, the provisional. When I came out, what they did is they put me on the pathway to become a GP. And I guess it's their, because I've been practicing 27 years, I'm not doing a residency or fellowship or anything. I'm going through a pathway, what they call a comparable pathway, to become a GP so that I can, be a rural health medicine specialist as a GP, because you actually have rural health medicine specialists who do fellowships, and that's what they're trained in. So my supervising docs are docs who've completed fellowships in rural health medicine, and that was mandatory by the Medical Council of New Zealand. I cannot be supervised by a GP in rural health medicine. I have
Okay.
to be supervised by a rural health medicine specialist. And that was difficult to find a full-time because I'm doing rural. So I went to a little town to work for a month and then came to the town that I'm in now to work the rest of the time. And that doc is part-time. So I didn't even meet him until 2 months after I came. I just, thank God I've done locum tenens because I just kind of hit the ground running because the GP that was there got COVID. So there was nobody, you know, I came in, met him one day and then he was gone for 2 weeks, you know? So, but I just, you know, it worked out and I was able to do it and I had help with the nurses and everything else. But my medical council in New Zealand is very specific about me being supervised and what I have to follow. I have to get a monthly evaluation, meet them, you know, every week. And then after for 2 weeks, I meet every, I think 3 months or something like that. And it's just very strict. And there are other things I have to do, read up on these treaties, do modules. And once I finish the pathway as it's written, then I become a GP.
Okay. And how long does that pathway typically take?
Well, the provisional, my supervision is 2 years, but I have, 1 year, but I have 3 years to complete the process of becoming a GP.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And then, go ahead.
That's my goal, is to complete the pathway and be a GP. I applied for permanent residency.
Got it. So. Oh, that's fantastic. And so supervision, it sounds like you meet initially on a weekly basis and then it spreads out. What does that supervision entail? Are you reviewing patient cases or what does that actually look like?
Well, when I worked in the other town, I had to go there for a month because that was where they had a full-time rural health doc at the time. And I was only there for a month. And that doc, it was just working with them. I was seeing patients. I started seeing patients, doing everything, and I would just run them by him, kind of like a resident.
Yeah.
And he's like 3 years out of fellowship, and I 7 years. But he's excellent. He was an excellent doc, and I just kind of ran the cases and said, "What do you think about this?" He said, "That sounds fine." He just has to know what cases I'm seeing, and that also the cultural aspect, the Maori experience, you know, the Maori people, that you understand their process and the way they approach dying. All of that is involved in my supervision. How am I interacting with the Maori patients, the indigenous people, as well as the Kiwis, the European, you know, and all of that is part of the evaluation. And then the same thing here. And that's why I have to do the modules on the treaties and learn different things about their culture. I'm going to be taking some courses and stuff like that. And I'm okay with that because I want to get entrenched in this environment. And I really like their approach to indigenous people here.
Wow, so you actually have modules to learn more about the treaties that the Maori people made with the New Zealand government or about Maori culture itself. And that helps you take better care of the Maori patients that you have.
Exactly. And I think that's what I did because we don't do that in the US for the Native Americans. We don't even think about them in that context, you know, indigenous people, and that maybe we need to remember like we're kind of in their country. That mentality doesn't exist in the US. They're almost invisible. That's
mind-blowing to me, that actually that there's this acknowledgement, recognition, and realization that some of the cultural aspects that they have are actually quite different, especially around, I can imagine, end of life and dying, which would be important as a working in rural health where you do both emergency medicine and inpatient medicine.
And it's just very humane. It's very touching. Myself, it's weird because I'm not an emotional person. I'm really not. I learned how to compartmentalize in the ER pretty well. But when I came here, I just was telling my supervising doc in the small time, I said, I don't know what's the matter with me. Why I keep bursting into tears? I don't know what's the matter with me, you know, because these families are so close and so connected, and they accept death and dying more readily. There's not this superhuman effort to keep people alive. You let them die with dignity. But it's when they're in the process of dying, it's very emotional. and how the docs related to them, because these docs know these patients in these small towns. They know them because sometimes they come in and out. So they sit down and they talk and they say, okay, it's time. There's nothing else we can do. It's, maybe tell a wife that the husband is not going to make it. And so we want to make them comfortable, and they start the hospice process, everything. And sometimes the families are not ready, but the doc just in a very compassionate, humane way explain to them there are no more choices. This is it. So let's let them have peace and be comfortable and not suffer. And I would like to do this and I would like to do that, because you have to do it with the consent of the family.
Right.
And they'll take whatever time it takes to talk to them. So when we were giving on patients, whatever time it took is whatever time it took. And that's what made me emotional, is that there wasn't this rush like we have in America where you got to hurry. When my mom was dying, I mean, they got hospice in there and they set these meetings. They're like trying to make rush and everything. Nobody was being compassionate. They were just, well, your mom's going to die. She's probably not going to make it. Most people who have the surgery she had won't make it. And so we're going to call the palliative care. And like, it was so cold, they're not. And so it just kind of made me think of my mom, and I wish she would have had that,
Oh, wow.
Very emotional. So I pulled myself together, because I'm like, these people are going to think I'm crazy if I don't stop. They're not going to have much, faith in me if I'm falling every time I come into the room, so.
But it sounds like what's been really important to you is just that humanity that you've experienced. And it sounds like just that compassion, treating people with dignity. It sounds like that's what's touched you after 25, 27 years practicing emergency medicine. And that's kind of the reminder of what a lot of people go into medicine for. It's for that connection, for even when someone is dying, being able to care for them with dignity.
Right.
That's
and
amazing.
The funny thing, I didn't go into medicine like that. That's the whole thing, is I went in because I loved anatomy and physiology, and I wanted to see in the human body. And I'd done pathology in college. I worked as a pathology assistant, and I said, well, I don't want to work with dead bodies. I want live bodies. And I knew I loved ER, so I decided to go down that path. The love of the patients and the empathy came when, in my training, I realized these people who don't know me, especially ones who bring their children, are handing you their most prized, valued possession and letting you practice on them so that you can become the doctor that I am. I believe I'm a good doctor, but I couldn't have become that without those patients allowing me to do that. And they trusted that I would do right by them. That's when it changed for me, because as medicine became corporatized, they became commoditized. And all of a sudden, the doctors who are enabling this, and other healthcare workers, nurses, and so on, it's like we forgot that we became what we have with their help. None of us would be doctors without people who let us practice on them. I'm very good in pediatric emergency medicine, adult emergency, but I couldn't do that if they didn't let me learn on them. So then how do I turn around and treat them like a commodity? That's when it changed for me. That's when it became emotional, because it's like, that's how you thank someone who made you the doctor that you are, is you treat them like property, like they don't matter, and you get irritated by them. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
I couldn't let it go. And, trying to work in ER with that kind of mentality, people look at you like you're strange, like you have two heads or something, because they don't, when I go wipe the spit off somebody's mouth from a nursing home, or they wipe the sleep out their eyes, or get them a clean gown because they have crust and food on it. And I do that in the ER when I'm busy. I do that because they deserve that dignity. And just because they're demented doesn't mean they shouldn't have that dignity. So because it became corporatized and people are rushing, I was just efficient. I could do stuff fast, and I could change a patient. I could change sheets under a patient by myself. I'd learn how to do all that by a nurse, by a really good nurse I work with. And I do that because I'm like, I don't want them laying in their urine, and we can't keep saying, well, we're busy. We went into medicine. It's always busy. You can't keep using that as an excuse that you can't do something. But COVID changed all that, because you are so busy that you can't do that. And I don't blame healthcare workers for that, but this was way before COVID. And because the system chronically understaffs, that becomes the culture, chronically understaffing, because it saves money. So then, of course, you never have enough people to do anything.
Yeah.
That is not the patient's fault. That's
Yeah.
not their fault. So I'm not going to treat them like that. So
Yeah.
I didn't get any patient after because I was corporatized for a while. I played the game and I bought my house, made a lot of money, and I was miserable. I took a patient to walk out of my ER and tell me I was the most miserable doctor she ever met. Doesn't understand how she changed my path that day and made me go back to how I had been trained.
Wow.
Because I'm like, I mean, think about it. If somebody walks out of your ER and you make them feel worse than when they came in, it's an ER. People come there because they already feel worse. And I made them feel even more worse to where they left. That's not a great accomplishment. And I went home that day and I said, you know what? I didn't have anything against her. I was just miserable. I didn't like working the way that I was working, like it was a business. And I said, you know what, that's not how I was trained. And that's not even who I am, because I love the art of medicine. So I'm just going to go back and do what I did before. And I've been happy ever since. Never had a patient complain in like 15 years in the ER. Traveling as a locum tenens doc all over the place, never got one complaint. Take care of the patient, you don't. Put them first.
Yeah.
You know, so New Zealand, they let you do that.
That's incredible. And I think that sentiment of feeling like you're rushing through patients because of kind of the corporate culture, feeling like that physician-patient relationship is kind of a pawn in the scheme of healthcare. I think a lot of people feel that way, and they don't feel good about the type of medicine that they're forced to practice, or the type of medicine they feel like they have to practice just to get by, just to kind of get by in the system. So I think that's going to resonate with a lot of people. So how do you then balance, now that you've moved to New Zealand, you're on the rural health medicine pathway, you're working under a supervisor, but it sounds like you mostly run cases by this person, by this physician, and you're essentially treated like an attending. He or she needs to know kind of the types of patients that you're seeing. You're learning about the Maori culture, and you're probably learning about the New Zealand health system as well, which is a little different. How can you speak a little bit about what the income, what your salary looks like, or what the benefits are like in New Zealand compared to the US, and how you kind of maybe balance that difference?
Well, because I was working locum tenens as an independent contractor mostly, my income varied. So this has been a long time, like 15 years since I've had a regular paycheck that was reliable, you know, because I negotiated contracts. Sometimes they didn't want to pay me what I wanted, and then you don't work, so you got to live off the money you've made and all that. Now here, I was very happy with my package. It amounts to US dollars, I think about 200,000 a year. And that's low for ER. But in the US, I wasn't making, you know, of course, being a woman, and a lot of times being Black, you're not going to get paid what you're white. I mean, some of the docs who said they make like 350,000 a year, I never made that. I never made that. I was not hired. If I negotiated things like that, you know, I got a reputation for asking for too much money. And I said, that's absurd, because I know what the range is for ER, but they thought I was asking for too much. So now that I'm out here, I felt like the package they offered me with the CME, with the vacation, I mean, the vacation time that they make sure you take, that was unreal.
Sorry, vacation time that they make sure you take?
Yeah, because you have to take it. It's like, you know, I think like 6 weeks or something, but you have to take it. And so, and people here take their vacation. I mean, I mean, it's like they're on leave. They're on leave. And every time you call, it's like somebody's on leave. And I'm like, how much vacation do they get? And then I saw 6 weeks, you know, like, and so everybody takes it. And then you have, you know, sick days and personal time off and all of the stuff that they took away from ER that we used to have. They took all that away. You know, have that is like unbelievable to me. Like, so when I saw it, I was grateful, because I said, I may not make as much as I could have made in the US, but it is balanced out. And because I'm on socialized healthcare, I'm not paying for health insurance. So I'm not spending $600 a month like I was in the US. So in some ways, yeah, it does balance. And I have a mortgage back home. I have a house, I have utilities, but my utilities are low because no one's there. My niece is living there now and she's paying the utilities until she gets her house built. But I still have to pay the mortgage. I still have to pay the property taxes and I pay for rent out here, but I'm managing. It's working. You know, I just found a place that was within my range, like you would anywhere. And my school loan, I think I owe about $700, and then those will be done. And I think it's doable. You know, and I talked to docs who were out here, and there were some who had homes in the States and were still living in New Zealand. I said, were you able to pay a mortgage and rent? And they're like, yeah. You know, you just have to be frugal. And if you've been a medical student, you've been broke, you know how to be frugal. And I'm good at that. So I was like, okay, you know, money was actually pretty tight when I came because I was furloughed, like a lot of ER docs. So I didn't have like steady income when COVID hit. So this is like, this kind of dug me out of that hole. So I know that it's not as much as it is in the US, but I'm pretty comfortable. You know?
That's, I think, really important to highlight because it's pretty well known that the most well-paid doctors around the world are in the US. And so one of the questions, it doesn't matter which country, is how do you balance maybe the lower salary with some of the benefits that you get, the vacation that you're supposed, that where the culture is that you take that vacation, where you have sick days, where you actually have paid time off. And sometimes I think that that actually balances out that lower salary and the lifestyle and the connection you're actually having with patients now, where I can't think of anything better than that connection and that lifestyle, kind of preventing and healing some of the burnout that I think a lot of American physicians are experiencing as well.
And there's and because I'm rural, I get more money for that. Yeah, we used to US, but then that kind of stopped, right? You pay a lot lower. It was higher, which is why I liked working rural too, but then it started to drop. Out here, you get paid for more because it's just very difficult to get doctors rural. Okay, it's not hard to get doctors in Christchurch or Auckland or any of that, but trying to get them rural is very difficult. So you get more, but then I have the added benefit because I'm the only full-time doc, believe it or not. I'm American. I'm the only one who's full-time. And so if I want supplemental income, I can work an extra shift here and there. Like if a doc is sick or someone can, because they use locum tenens because, you know, they still need doctors to fill in some spots. So when I do those shifts, I get paid as a locum tenens doc, and that's about $200 an hour. And that's my supplemental income because my full-time is like, it's really like 40 hours a week. Supposed to be 32. They said, forget, 32 and 8 hours of administrative time, but they're like, yeah, good luck with that. You're rural, you're the only full-time doc, well, you won't be seeing any administrative time other than what you're doing. And I'm like, okay, because 40 hours when I was doing 60 to 80 as an ER doc is like laughable, and so I have a lot. There's a period where I have every month I have 9 days off straight. And I can do a lot of stuff. And those are just my days off. That's the way it worked out. And all the docs kind of have schedules like that. And so it's very doable. And if I want to work extra, I make extra money, and I have that advantage too, because I can work anywhere in the same district board. I can work at any of the hospitals if they need help. So I have that option of working extra and getting that. Unlike in the US, when you work extra, you didn't get paid extra, right? You come in and you work, but you have a salary, so that's what you get, but your hours can vary. And here, once it's over 40, I get locum tenens pay.
Wow, that's incredible. And how does malpractice work in New Zealand?
I really don't know. I know I was told to get medical indemnity, and I got it, but I just don't. They just said people don't really sue here, but you are expected to get it. It's kind of required. And they take it out of like my paycheck. I don't really see it. And that's it. Like it's not, I haven't even thought, to be honest. It's a good question because I have not thought about malpractice. I don't worry about getting sued. I don't feel that pressure at all. So that's funny. Did you bring that up? Because I'm like, wow, I didn't even think about that. That's a good question. Maybe I should. Maybe I should just stay at the game. But I've been so not worried it's like a culture shock. You made me just think for a minute. I don't know. That's a good question. I can't answer.
Well,
all I can tell you, I have it.
well, that's good. You have it. But I think that says a lot that that's actually not one of the first things that you think about when you go into an ED shift is like, how do I practice? How do I make sure I just don't get sued today, or, you know, have a situation where I could get sued in the future?
Don't even think about it. Not even happening.
Huge.
And a thought. And now that you mentioned, I'm like, wow, that's a weight lifted.
Yeah,
In fact,
that's a
I
huge
thought about it because it was an everyday occurrence. So I can't believe
Yeah.
it hasn't entered my head. And the other is that we have a union. That was wonderful when I filled out that paperwork. And it's like, and I sent my contract to the union because they're called ASMS. And you can actually, when you're looking at a contract with a company in New Zealand, you can contact them and ask them to review the contract, and they do it for free.
Wow. So can you tell us that this is a union for physicians?
Yes.
Okay. A lot of people are not going to be aware of this. So can you tell us more about what this union does and how it, I assume it supports physicians?
Are new, obviously, to me because we have them. This one's called ASMS. There is another one, I believe, but this is the one that most of the docs in New Zealand go to. And again, I contacted physicians who were in New Zealand before I applied, before I came out. And all of them said, you have to join the union. And when you get your application packet, it says in there, one of the things it says, do you intend on joining a union or not? And so you should mark yes, and then you just take care of that later. And then you contact ASMS and they give you all that information. In the Northern District Health Board, who I work for, follow their contract is written based on ASMS. Okay. If I wasn't with ASMS, then my contract would be directly with them, with the hospital. Okay. But it's with the district board, but they are they have to follow the contract as written by the ASMS. Got it. So that's, you know, and it made it easy because the way they set it up is to follow those guidelines, because so many doctors belong to the ASMS. It's just easier to make them compatible, the guidelines and stuff. So when the recruiter's like, I mean, not the recruiter, but the agent was reading my contract, I said, well, it looks like they're telling me that I have to do call like every 8 days, but it may change depending on how many doctors. And she said, it doesn't matter because the contract says this, and they know that they have to bring somebody in. And if they're going to have you do it, then that changes the terms of what you get paid. And they know that, so don't worry about it because they know that. And if that happens, they will step in. And I was like, I just felt protected, you know? Like, you know, and she read everything and said, okay, the contract's good as it's written. They offered you 4 weeks, you know, because here they offered me 4 weeks to cover. And thank God it's a doc named Carmen Brown. Okay, so
we've connected.
I know from a makeup group because I'm a makeup artist, right? We love makeup. That's how I met her. I didn't know she was in Australia. You know, she was someone I was talking to a lot. She's the one that said, make sure you join the union, make sure you have them read your contract. And so when you know, they had said, we'll give, you know, they would cover me like for 4 weeks for rental car and housing till I found a place. The union said, ask for 8 weeks because 4 weeks will go by too fast. And they agreed to 6. We both agreed to 6 weeks. And so they rented a car, and I'm in the housing right now. I'll be moving out tomorrow, actually. A place to rent. And they paid for everything. Wow. So that can come in your contract too, where they cover housing and stuff till you have time to find a place.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's really incredible. It sounds like just having a lawyer look over your contract for free from the physicians union is huge. And we actually did speak to Dr. Carmen Brown earlier, and she did tell us a little bit more about the physician union and that it really does advocate for physicians and to help them provide good care, to give them kind of the boundaries they need to not get burnt out and have a positive lifestyle experience.
Make sure you get paid for maybe an extra service you're doing. That they don't get to scoot that in and just kind of add it as extra hours that you get paid. Like, and they send it out to you. They send the information out to you, right? Here's what's happening right now. Here's what we're fighting for, and blah. And I was
Yeah.
like, I mean, it's just a shock because I didn't have that. We didn't have that in
We
the
don't have
U.S.
that.
So you
Yeah.
don't have somebody sending you and saying, hey, well, here's what we're doing on your behalf, and there's what's been
Yeah.
going on. And I'm a physician. Physicians don't
Yeah.
have union, you know.
They don't.
So I'm still adjusting because I've been here since April 30th.
Yeah.
So I feel like I'm still adapting
Yeah.
to that stuff, not to the country. I'm settling in nicely. It's to the culture shock of being a physician where you have a union, where you're protected, where medical indemnity is not something that you need to feel threatened about.
Right.
Somebody, you know, that it's more for your protection just in case rather than defensive medicine, you know. And I realize, I mean, my whole mentality is one of adjusting my whole psyche, like when I'm in a room seeing a patient, not feeling the angst that I have to hurry. Somebody's going to say, Dr. Newman, you're in this room too long. You need to go see this patient. Okay, we need this bed. And that, I mean, and that's an everyday battle to get that out of my head, you know, and say, I don't have to do that because no one's coming. No one's, you know, they're sitting, they're seeing patients or they're sitting in the, nobody's looking at what I'm doing. And what's most amazing is the tea, the culture of tea. Everybody's got to have tea.
Tea. Oh, to drink. Tea time. Okay.
A hospital with patients in the bed, and the person who does like the housekeeping has a tray and goes down the hallway periodically and looks in each room, tea, coffee, coffee. That, and I'm examining a patient. Are like, would you like tea? And I'm like, do they care if they have congestive heart failure?
Right.
You know, or nobody cares. They don't ask, can they have tea? Is it, you know, it's so cultural that they just go in the room and the person's like, yeah, I have some with a little milk. Yes, I like them. All of the patients.
Wow.
Yeah, and so I think I have to step in if they can't have it, but I haven't stepped in because I feel uncomfortable. It's not interfering. It's actually not affecting. The patient says, no, I can't have that. I have to have, there's no decaf.
Okay.
There's no decaf, you know, but most people drink tea rather than coffee. The majority drink tea. And so nobody cares. But just to have going up and down a hospital hallway, not with a cart of towels, with tea, you know?
Yeah, that's so different.
Kind of funny, but I love it.
Yeah.
You know, I just feel today I got a little emotional because yesterday I was shopping for the new place and I said, wow, I live in New Zealand. This is my home. Like I'm home and I'm settled in, and I just got emotional. Like I'm where I belong. You know, I just, last week I turned in my permanent visa. I submitted my permanent residency visa because I'm like, I'm staying. I don't want to go home. I'm done. So I'll go home and visit, but I don't want to go back home to live. I have to decide when I'm going to do at my house because you know, I like it. But
wow, that's incredible. It sounds like you found a place where you feel at home in a way that you hadn't previously.
It's my new home.
That's amazing.
I feel safe.
You feel safe. Wow. That is amazing. And that's a feeling worth holding on to and worth preserving, I think. So what were some of it, since you just moved in April, what are some of the challenges you encountered in transitioning to New Zealand?
Well, the lingo.
Okay.
Because lab here is called eclair, which I know as a dessert.
Right. That's what I'm thinking of.
So I'm looking on the screen and it says eclair and it means labs. You know, and that the WH sound, which for us is like a, you know, where and while that is a F sound. So a town called Whangarei, I thought it was Whangarei, you know, they tell you because they're like, listen, you're killing me with the way you're butchering, right? You know, so it's Whangarei, you know, it's Whangarei, but it's spelled WHAN, but pronounced like it's FAN, you know.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so that was another, and just kind of slang words that what they use. I forgot what they call when it's a bowel movement, and I had never heard of it. It's, and that's what I'm learning. And you know, and I have to remember not to say Tylenol because they don't know what that is. Paracetamol. And I'm like, and they don't have Toradol. They don't know what that is. They
Oh,
don't have the formulary, never heard of it. They don't have meclizine, you
wow.
know. And so, I mean, Benadryl, they have meclizine, but it's not in the formulary.
Oh,
Formulary here is what is paid for by this corporation called Pharmac. They pay for
hmm,
all these medicines and socialized health care, and everybody only has to pay a $5 copay. If you do it
wow.
outside the formulary, you have to pay whatever the price is. So
Okay,
the majority of people, you have to use the formulary.
right.
And so I made the mistake of writing someone for something that wasn't in the formulary. And the doc, there is a doc who's responsible for me being here, and she's the one that kind of helped the MCNZ write the guidelines. And she was working that day, and she's like, "No one told you about Pharmac?" And I'm like, "Yeah, no, I don't know what Pharmac is." She said, "We put a patient for a medication that they now have to pay out of their pocket for." I felt like crap,
Mm, yeah.
called the patient. I felt like maybe I should take money out of my pocket and just pay for it. But she's like, "No, this is part of the training. It just took, just missed it, but here's what that is." And
Yeah.
so now that I have it, I'm like, okay, cool, because I went and picked up my medicine. It doesn't hardly cost anything.
It's
But
amazing.
yeah,
And so
so it,
Pharmac provides kind of a list of medications. So do you have access to then the list of medications that are approved? And so then you can kind of pick off the equivalents.
New
Okay.
Zealand formulary is online. You go to New Zealand
Oh,
formulary. Pharmac is the company that provides the medication. Think of them like a Rite Aid or something, or like
okay.
more like a pharmacy benefit manager, but it's only
Okay.
one. And they say, as long as we will provide the meds as long as they use these meds. And the
Okay.
New Zealand formulary is what gives you the list of the meds.
Okay.
And it'll tell you, because if it's red, that's not in the formulary. If it's green, it's
Mm,
approved.
okay.
So it's very easy, and it's a huge formulary. It is, but sometimes they have the meds, sometimes they don't. And
Got
that's,
it.
like I was in the I'm a vet, so I have the VA. I gave
Yeah.
up my care was at the VA in the US, and it's the same. They have a formulary that's
Formulary.
limited. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's limited,
Okay.
and that's covered by the VA, and when it's covered, it's pretty cheap.
Okay.
It feels the
And
same. Yeah.
fantastic. All right, so now we're going to switch over to kind of wrap up this session because I know it's getting to be nighttime and it's, you're moving tomorrow, so you got to get some rest. So we're going to switch to something new. They're called 3 quick rapid fire questions. And it's just kind of the first word that comes to your head or the first sentence that comes to your head. All right, so what is a cool place you have visited after moving to New Zealand?
A shame I haven't gone to too many places. Oh, you know what? Ahipata, which is
Hayapata.
Ahipata, Ahipara. It's what they call the far north.
Okay.
Beautiful, beautiful place. And oh yeah, I was told not to tell anybody about it because it's like a hidden secret. But just right on the beach, it's just beautiful, and the weather's very temperate. But it's very, very, very rural. But it's
Wow.
beautiful. It's like a hidden paradise, Ahipata.
Wow. All right.
Yeah.
Well, that sounds like a fantastic place to keep hidden then. um, okay. What is a piece of advice you would give to someone who's on the fence about coming to New Zealand, who's like, I'm thinking about it. I don't know. They're just kind of on the fence.
I would suggest they do a locum tenens. If they
Yeah.
think it's something to do a temp job.
Yeah.
There are a lot of, they use locum tenens a lot. So I would do that. And the reason I took a 2-year contract was because of docs who came for like a year locum tenens, and all of them said, I wish I would have stayed longer.
Yeah.
So when I had the option of having 1 or 2 years, I took the 2-year contract because I felt that I would feel the same way. Now I'm really glad I did.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's a great piece of advice to try it out through a locums position and see if you like it and see if it suits you. And the last question is, has this relocation, has this move been worth it for you?
100%.
100%.
For the peace of mind that I feel, and I didn't realize I was depressed
Mm,
until I got here. And my family, the first time I contacted them after I was settled in, all commented on how happy I looked and how relaxed I looked. I was a homebody at home. I just stayed in the house. I was like a hermit. I didn't do anything. I was in bed all the time, and I didn't recognize
Mm,
like that I was that depressed. And it was
yeah.
not only because of the healthcare issue, but the socioeconomic climate, the racial climate, the
Yeah.
political climate, and that kind of stuff. I'm an activist by nature, and that stuff was really affecting me profoundly. And it was so, and then COVID just compounded
Mhm.
everything. And I just couldn't shake it. My mother died in 2018, and I feel like I'm still kind of recovering
Mhm.
from that. But and every time our anniversary comes around, but it was like all of that compounded. I felt like I just wasn't shaking it. I wasn't in a good place mentally. And the day I got on the plane on New Zealand, it just felt different. I felt a
Mm,
lift. I just felt lighter, like a
mm,
weight was lifted. And once I settled into New Zealand and got to the little town I was in, I just felt different. I felt happier. I felt again safe because I didn't feel
safe.
safe in the US. Yeah, I was worried because of the racial climate of something happening, and I didn't feel that anymore. And I felt happy. I just felt happy for the first time in a long
Mm,
time, and I still feel that way. I'm very happy.
yeah.
So 100% I would do it again.
Wow. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Natalie Newman. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for sharing your story. And just from chatting with you, it really does feel like you've said over and over again that you feel like you are safe, that you have found a home, and a home should feel safe.
That's
Um,
right.
and so thank you so much for sharing your story with us.
Well, I appreciate you inviting me. I've enjoyed it. Thank you.
For those who are interested in moving to New Zealand and are feeling overwhelmed with the relocation process, or are struggling with navigating licensure or finding a job, and you really want to find a way forward, sign up for our guidance service. We have partnered with Dr. Carmen Brown of Expat MD, and she provides personalized guidance to fellow physicians looking to move to New Zealand. You can sign up at www.hippocraticadventures.com/guidance. And with that, we wrap up another episode of Discovering Where Your White Coat Can Take You. So don't forget to subscribe, like, or post a comment, and share this with your colleagues or friends.